Welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. This video contains 150 photos of British saloon cars of the 1950s and 1960s, and is part 2 in a two-part series of this title. If you've not seen part 1 as yet, I'll include a link to it at the end of this collection. Okay, to begin with, we have a Ford Consul Mark II from the 1950s. Next, we have 678 UXE, which is a 1954 Standard 8. Lovely little car. And a Ford Popular 103E, registration TDH 507. Sticking with the side valve Fords, this is a Ford 100E, a Popular, again from the mid-1950s, and this rarity is a Riley Pathfinder RXW399 from 1955. There's a Jaguar Mark II. Continuing this video of classic British saloons of the 1950s and 1960s, and from just before the 1950s is my old 1949 Austin A40 Devon, and continuing with A40s, this is an Austin A40 Farina Mark II. There's a side view of an Austin A35 race car, and a Sunbeam Stiletto, the perked up version of the Hillman Imp. There is a lesser spotted Morris Isis Saloon of the 1950s. And a magnificent Bentley, registration 1PLW. That number happens to be on a Metro 6R4 of all things now. And DLJ 466C, which is a Wolseley 6110 from 1965. And a group of Ford Zephyr Mark IIIs. A rear view of a Vauxhall Velox PA saloon with the wraparound rear window as opposed to the three-piece rear window, and here we have the Riley 1.5, which was based on the Morris Minor platform but with the 1489B series engine in it. And here we have a Wolseley 680, beloved of police forces in many 1950s films, and another Pop 103E. And there's a Morris Minor Million. With its bonnet raised is a Vauxhall Viva HA series from 1966. There's a slightly modified MG Magnet. And down at the NEC, an Austin A70 Hampshire. Very rare car with a Dorset of all things in the background. And here's a race prepared Ford 100E, two-door saloon. A 1960s design, Rover P6, this is the V8 3.5 litre version. And there's a Hillman Minx, also from the 1960s, 1963 to be precise, and there's a Daimler Conquest from the 1950s, on wedding duties by the look of it. There's a Morris Mini Cooper S Mark I. And there's another Ford Popular 103E. 325 FMG is a very nicely turned out black Standard 10 from 1955. There's a Wolseley 1885, a rebadged version of the old Land Crab, the Austin Morris 1800. There's a re-engined Morris Minor which has an XPAG MG engine in it of all things. If you know any more history on that particular car, let me know. There's a very sleek Wolseley 690, a very handsome car indeed. There's one of the big Farinas, this time an MG Magnet. This was seen at Alton Park a few years ago, a racing Jaguar Mark II saloon. VBP93, which is a 1956 Austin A50 Cambridge with the 1.5 litre B series engine. OOH745G, that's a Morris 1800S that was used on the London to Mexico World Cup Rally in 1970. And there's an MG Y-type saloon. The rear view of a Jaguar 3.4, retrospectively known as the Mark I. And there's an early Jowett Javelin with the smaller headlamps. And a Vanden Plas 1300, twin carburettors, so probably a manual version as opposed to the automatic. There's a Mark II Austin Mini Cooper, or Cooper S. A mighty Humber Super Snipe. Very transatlantic styling. There's a close-in of the Riley Kestrel, the Riley badged version of the Austin Morris 1100, the AD016. There's a Jaguar 420, which was a reworked S-Type Jaguar, but with a 4.2 litre engine in it. There's an early Wolseley 1500 with a small front side lights. A Manchester LD10 with the Briggs bodywork. There was also the Barker bodied version at the same time. There's a Vauxhall Cresta E-Series PCA 108. Another Vauxhall, this time 715 FBF, which was 1962 Vauxhall Victor. I think this was a VX 490 with the twin carburettors. And there's a driver's eye view from our old Morris Minor MM from 1952. Then we've got XOY 622, which was a 1960 Triumph Herald with a 948cc engine. That came along initially in the standard 10. And there's a Ford 100E Prefect, Prefect being the four-door version of the 100E range. There's a very smartly turned out Austin A40 Somerset with the 1200 B series BMC engine in it. And then PWA 439, that's a Bentley R-Type by H.J. Mulliner from 1952, and a Morris 1100 there. And a Vauxhall Cresta PC from 1966 with a 3.3 litre straight six engine. Sticking with Vauxhall for a moment, we've got 292XUN, that's a 1956 Wyvern EIX, the four-cylinder car. There's a Singer Gazelle. And a Jowett Javelin with its bonnet raised. There's a Jaguar 420G, appropriate registration, which was the 4.2 litre version of the Mark 10. We've got a Sunbeam Talbot 90. CSK 333F, that's an MG 1100 from 1967. Some more BMC badge engineering. This is the Riley 472, the big Farina. This one's from 1964. And the rear view of the Austin A40 Farina Mark 1 Saloon with a fixed rear window. And the front view of the same car, showing its wavy grille. There's a Riley Elf on the Riley Motor Club stand at the NEC. Big classic car show every year. And a gathering of Imp and Imp derivatives at Oulton Park. And a Lagonda 3 litre. ERC 903, it looks like a Ford Anglia, but it's actually from 1954 with the 1172 engine, so it must be a POP 103E. And there's an Austin A60 Cambridge. JBO 137, that's a 1953-1954 registered Bristol 403. And there's an S-Type on plain steel wheels. Another MG Magnette, this one on widened steel wheels, looking quite purposeful. There's a Rover P4, the 100. An Austin Metropolitan alongside an Austin A35 and an A95 Westminster. There's a fairly early Rover P6 2000. Another S-Type, this one on chrome wires, painted gunmetal grey. Austin A55 Cambridge Mark II, Dad's Wolseley alongside. There's a Hillman Super Minx. 406 BHU, that's a Bristol 406, that was the first production car used for various press and publicity duties. There's a Morris Oxford, another big Farina. Austin A35, followed by Mark II Mini Cooper. NHT 140, that's a 1950 Bristol 400. Morris Minor 1000. And a An Austin A90 Atlantic. There's an A55 Cambridge, the Mark I version. The Ford Consul Classic, a four-door saloon. There's a Ford Zephyr 6, it's a convertible version, but I couldn't lay my hands on a saloon to include here, so I included that version instead. There's a Ford Prefect E93A. Continuing with these British saloons of the 50s and 60s, we have a Triumph Vitesse. It'll be a 2-litre car with a Rotoflex back end, and probably the rarest car in this collection, an Austin A40 Dorset, the two-door version of the A40 Devon, only made for a couple of years. There's an RM Riley with a non-original radiator mascot. Side view of a Morris Mini Cooper or Cooper S Mark I. Another four-door Ford Prefect in the 100E range. Sticking with Ford, there's another Mark II Consul, this time a white example, UGJ657. An XNG256, that's an Austin Princess A135 from 1958, with a body by Vanden Plas. There's a Mini, Austin Mini Cooper S. Standard 10, very underrated little car, they drive surprisingly well. There's an XJ6 Series 1 Jaguar, they were introduced in 1968, this is a short wheelbase car. There's a side-on view of a 1950s Morris Oxford. Triumph Herald 1360, circa 1967-68, with a 1296 four-cylinder engine. Back to the NEC and the Armstrong Siddeley, and this is a 236 of 1955 to 57. There's a good old Morris Minor 1000. Had to include a few of those. And the Vauxhall Victor FB. The Wolseley Hornet, another version of the Mini. This mighty saloon ATU294F is an Austin Westminster from 1967, with one of its smaller brothers alongside. There's another A55 Cambridge Mark I. And another Triumph Vitesse Mark II, showing off its engine bay and excellent accessibility. There's a Mark II Zephyr. The Daimler V8 250 looking a little damp. The Rover 90, again from the P4 series, a little earlier than the car that was shown before. There's a Morris Oxford Farina. Side view of a Mark II Zephyr. This machine is an Armstrong Siddeley from 1947, so slightly early for this set of photographs. It's an 18-horse limousine based on the Whitley. There's Austin 1100 Mark II. Tried to include most of the derivatives of the AD016 line in this particular video. There's a Morris Oxford MO, big brother to the Minor, of course. Very jazzy Ford Anglia 105E on white wall tyres. And there's a Ford Prefect E493A being followed in by a 100E. A Mark II Consul. An S-Type, this time on painted wires. If you can add any information in about the particular car shown here, please let me know, or pop a note into the comments ideally. There's a Mark II Cortina. An Armstrong Siddeley 9442RE, which is a 1960 Star Sapphire. A mighty Humber Super Snipe. This handsome machine, XNX 400, that's a 1958 Austin A95 Westminster. Real classic British car of the 1950s. And here's another one, the Riley RM. The rear view of a Ford Cortina Mark I GT on mini lights. And there's the Riley 2.6, this replaced the Pathfinder that was shown much earlier in this particular video. There's a Triumph Renown, post-war design, slightly more happy styling than the Mayflower, I think. Sticking with Triumph, there's a rear view of a Herald 1250. The 1250 had that Webasto roof as standard, the folding roof. And there's a rare Ford Corsair with a Crayford convertible version alongside, down at the NEC Classic Cars Show. And there's a Vauxhall Victor FD. The Sunbeam Rapier, popular with rallyists in the late 1950s. This handsome machine is a 1964 Alvis TE21. There's an Austin A30, a very bright blue colour, probably non-original. Looks in nice condition, a four-door car. And there's a late Hillman Super Minx with a squared-off rear window. The earlier ones had a wrap-around rear window, as on this Humber Sceptre, which was of course based on the Hillman Super Minx. This splendid machine is an AC 2-litre saloon, PPJ 834, and there's a Hillman Minx, one of the Arrow series cars of the late 1960s. NFW 848, that's a Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark III Sports Saloon. There's a side view of another Singer Gazelle. And a Wolseley 1885. Those doors went on to see service on the Austin Maxi, of course. And there's 7274H, which was a Bentley R-Type, Freestone and Webb. I'm not sure who put those indicators on it. And there's a rarity, a prototype Herald Fastback. A Hillman Minx Californian. Very smart little car indeed. You don't see those too often, but here's another one. Work in progress. Probably restored by now. There's a Singer Vogue, another derivative of the Hillman Super Minx design. 300 BXM is a Mark I Morris Mini from 1961, and Dame Margot Fontaine, the ballerina, was the first owner of that particular car. And here's the aforementioned Triumph Mayflower, slightly unusual looking car. For a head-on view of a Humber Hawk now, on the Roots Club stand. There's a Mark I Lotus Cortina, or technically being an early one with that Consul badge on the bonnet. It's a Consul Cortina. These were originally going to be called the Consul Cortina Sport Special. And to round out this collection of photographs, a Ford Zodiac Mark II. And that concludes the 150 photos of classic British saloons of the 1950s and 1960s that make up this particular video. If you've not seen part 1, I'll include a link to that now. Which contains another 150 photos of different cars, again of the 1950s, 1960s-ish, either built in that era or designed in that era. So thanks for watching this. Please check out part 1 if you haven't seen it, like and subscribe, etc, etc. Thanks for watching. Please see the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.